The train had put her down at a siding with no station house, only a plank platform grayed by weather, and a signboard that had lost its lettering to the sun. October in the Cariboo country did not announce itself with cold so much as with light, a thin, slanting gold that made everything look older than it was. She stood with her one case at her feet and watched the wagon come up the road, and she noted that the man driving it did not hurry and did not wave and did not seem to have decided yet whether he was glad she had come. He reined in a good 10 feet off as though the distance were a courtesy. She had time to look at him before he spoke. A big man gone quiet in the shoulders, the way men do when they have stopped expecting the day to go well. His right hand rested on his thigh and did not come up to touch his hat. She marked that. She marked most things and had for a long while now, since noticing had become the only reliable way she had of keeping herself safe. "You'll be the one from the advertisement," he said. Not a question. He had the flat, careful speech of a man who had learned that words cost something. "I am." He looked at her case and then at her, and something crossed his face that she could not name and did not try to. "It's a fair piece out to the place. You'll want to get up." She got up. She did not wait for him to come down and help her. Partly because she doubted the right hand would allow it, and partly because she had stopped waiting for that kind of thing years ago. He watched her arrange herself on the board seat, and she thought she saw him note in his turn that she sat facing forward and kept her spine straight and did not chatter. Perhaps that was to the good. Perhaps he had been braced for chatter. The road ran north along a river she did not know the name of yet, water the color of steep tea, quick over pale stones. The land climbed in long benches, jack pine and bunchgrass, and here and there a stand of aspen already bare, the leaves lying gold and rotting in the ditches. She counted fences as they passed and found most of them wanting. Wire sagged off the posts, a gate hung by one hinge and dragged a scar in the dirt where it had swung open too many times unmended. She said nothing. It was not yet hers to say anything about. "There's a woman comes Tuesdays," he offered once, as though the silence had begun to press on him. "Mrs. Threshy does the washing. You needn't, all right?" He seemed to want more from her than that, and not to know how to ask for it, and after a while he gave it up and let the horses take them on. The homestead sat in a bowl of land where two creeks met, and she understood at first sight both why a man would have chosen it and why it had defeated him. Good water, good shelter, the mountains standing back a respectful distance to the west, with the first snow already on their shoulders, and everything the hand of a man was supposed to keep up had been let go. The barn roof dipped where a purlin had failed. Kitchen garden was a rectangle of frost-killed weeds gone to seed. A wagon stood in the yard with a wheel off, propped on a block, and the look of the block said it had held that wagon up since summer at least. Chickens ranged loose and thin. 2 milk cows stood at a rail fence with their bags gone slack and hard-looking, and she felt her jaw tighten before she had decided to let it. "When were those 2 last milked?" she asked. He looked at the cows as though he had forgotten they were animals with needs and not just shapes in the yard. "Morning," he said. "Not this morning." He didn't answer. She got down from the wagon on her own and walked to the fence, and the nearest cow turned to her and lowed, low and urgent, and she put her hand flat on the swollen bag, and the cow flinched. "This one's near to spoiling," she said. "You leave a cow like this and she'll cake up and go dry on you, and then she's meat and not milk. And you've lost her for a fool's saving of half an hour." She said it plainly, the way she would have said the creek was running, and she watched to see how he took being told. He took it the way a man takes a stone in his boot he has been walking on all day and pretending not to feel. "I've been managing," he said. "You've been surviving," she said. That's a different thing. She had not meant to begin that way. She had meant to be quiet, to watch a week before she spoke, to learn the shape of the place and the man before she risked her position in it. But the cow's pain had gone straight past all that caution, and now the words were said, and she stood in the yard of a stranger's failing farm with her case still up on the wagon seat and waited to be told to get back on it. He didn't tell her that. He looked at the cow and at his own idle hand, and he said, "Lo, there's a pail in the barn, left of the door." So she found the pail, and she scoured it at the pump because it had not been scoured in far too long, and she sat down to that suffering cow in the last of the October light and did what needed doing, and the relief that came off the animal was a thing she could feel in her own shoulders. She milked both of them out slow and full and gentle. And when she carried the pails back, the man was standing on the porch of the house, watching her with an expression she filed away and did not examine, because to examine it would have been to hope, and hope was expensive, and she was not yet sure she could afford it here. The house inside told her the rest of the story the yard had begun. Good house, built by a man who had meant to stay. Square logs, a real stone chimney, a plank floor rather than dirt. And laid over all of it the gray film of a place kept by someone who had stopped caring whether it was kept. Ash heaped cold in the firebox and spilling onto the hearthstone. A dishpan of gray water gone scummed. On the mantel, a daguerreotype turned to face the wall, which she noticed and understood and left exactly as it was. She lit the stove because a cold stove in a house is a kind of despair made visible, and she would not sleep under it. She found the flour barrel and the lard and mixed biscuit dough with hands that remembered how without being asked, and while it baked, she scoured the dishpan and set water to heat and swept the worst of the floor. She did not do it to please him. She did it because a body that has known real want cannot sit still in a house going to ruin, not when the ruin is only neglect and neglect can be answered. He came in when the light was gone and stood in the doorway and looked at the fire in the stove and the swept floor and the biscuits cooling under a cloth, and she saw his throat work. "You didn't have to," he said. "No," she agreed. She set a plate in front of the chair that had the least dust on it and stood back. "Eat, you've the look of a man who's been forgetting to." He ate. He ate the way a hungry man does, who has been ashamed of his hunger, quick and then slower, and partway through, he set the biscuit down and pressed the heel of his good hand against his eyes for a moment, and she turned to the stove and gave him the privacy of her back. And neither of them said anything about it. She had learned that too, that there is a mercy in looking away. That night she slept in the small room off the kitchen that had plainly been meant for a hired hand and had the feel of never having been used. She lay awake a while, listening to the strange house settle and the creaks running, and once the man's step crossing the floor overhead, slow, and stopping and standing a long time at what she thought must be the window. She wondered what he stood looking at in the dark. She did not wonder long. She was tired in the deep way that has nothing to do with the day's work, and she slept. In the morning she learned his name was not the point. She had risen before light, as she always did, and had the fire going and the cows milked before he came down, and she had begun, without asking, on the books. She had found them in a drawer of the big desk in the front room. A ledger and a fistful of receipts, and a bank paper she read twice and set down carefully because it told her the thing was worse than the yard had said. There was a note against the place. There was a payment owing, come spring, that the farm as it stood could not meet. And behind the payment a whole winter of feeding stock on hay she was not sure existed in the quantity the herd would need. He came down and found her at the desk and stopped. "Those are mine," he said, and there was an edge on it, the first she'd heard. "They are," she said, and did not move from them. "And they're telling me you're going to lose this place by June unless something changes between now and then. Did you know that? Or were you not looking?" The edge went out of him all at once, the way it does when a man is too tired to hold even his own anger. He sat down across from her heavily. "I knew," he said. "I've known since August. I stopped opening it." He looked at the ledger as though it were an animal that might bite. There didn't seem to be a point. "How many head are you carrying?" 40. 41, with the bull. "And hay?" "Some. Not enough." "How much is not enough?" He told her, and she did the arithmetic she had been doing in her head since she read the bank paper, and it came out the same ugly way. "Then you sell down," she said. "Now before the snow, while there's still a market and they've still got flesh on them. You keep your best cows and the bull and you sell the rest, and you put that money against the note and you buy hay with what's left. And you winter light and careful and you come out the far side of March still owning your own ground. It's not the year you wanted, it's the year you've got." He looked at her for a long moment. "You've done this," he said. "Kept a place." "I've lost one," she said, "which teaches you more if you live through it." She had not meant to say that either. But it was out, and she saw him hear it, saw him understand that the flat competence he'd been leaning on all morning had been paid for, and that whatever had put her on that train to answer an advertisement for a farm wife in the Cariboo, it had not been an easy life ahead, but a hard one behind. He didn't ask. She was grateful for that, and it went some way toward deciding her about him. A man who didn't ask was a man who knew that some grief you carry, folded up small, and don't take out for strangers. They sold down that week. She went with him to the stockyard at the little town 2 hours off, and she watched him move through the buyers slow and stiff, and she saw the thing she had suspected, that the country knew him and pitied him, and that the pity was harder on him than the failure. A man came up and gripped his shoulder, the bad one, and she saw him whiten and hold still and take it. When the man had gone, she said, "Quiet. That shoulder. What happened to it?" He was a long time answering. They were leaning on the top rail watching their own cattle sorted from them into another man's pen, which is a particular kind of hurt, and perhaps that made it easier to say. Wagon went over on the grade above the river. 2 springs back. He stopped. She waited. She had learned the waiting was the thing. My wife was on the seat beside me. She didn't. The wagon came down on her side. His jaw worked. The shoulders, nothing. The shoulder healed crooked, is all. I don't much notice it except when men grip it. She looked out at the cattle and let the river fill the silence for a while. The picture on the mantel, she said, turned to the wall. I couldn't have her watching me let it all go, he said. And I couldn't turn her back around and let her see it either. So. He made a small motion with his good hand, a man setting down something too heavy to keep holding. You'll think me a poor sort. I think, she said carefully, that a man who loved his wife enough to fall apart when he lost her is not the worst sort of man to end up working for. And she left it there because it was as near to comfort as she knew how to come, and because she had felt something shift in her own chest saying it that she did not entirely trust. The money went against the note and the rest went to hay, and she made him drive her to see the hay before he bought it. And she pulled a flake apart in the barn of the man selling it, and smelled it, and shook her head at the first lot, and bought the second. And the seller looked at her, and then at him and said, "Where'd you find this one?" And the man said nothing, but she thought, driving home on the loaded wagon in the cold, that he sat a little straighter than he had. Winter came down out of the mountains the way it does in that country, without much warning and with no intention of leaving. The creeks froze to a black stillness. She learned the place in snow, which is a different place than the one in October. Learned where the drifts stacked against the barn and where the wind scoured the yard bare. Learned the ache of hauling water when the pump froze and had to be thawed with a kettle every dawn. She kept the cows milked twice a day without fail, morning and evening, in the dark and the cold, because a cow does not care that you are tired, and a cow left will punish you for it. And she would not lose an animal to her own weariness. The man learned to do it too, the milking, working the good hand and bracing with the bad, clumsy at first and then not. And she did not praise him for it, because praise would have made it a thing done for her, and she wanted it to be a thing he did for himself. She noticed as the winter went the ways he was coming back. It was not sudden, and there was no single morning she could have pointed to. It was in small things accumulating. He began to shave again. He mended the gate that had dragged its scar in the summer dirt, and oiled the hinge, and she heard the difference the next time the wind took it, and it did not shriek. He took the ruined wagon apart and set the wheel true and put it back together over 3 cold evenings in the barn by lantern light. And one night she carried out a lamp of her own and sat on an upturned crate and held the light for him while he worked the last of it. And they did not talk much, and it was the most at peace she had felt in longer than she wanted to reckon. She noticed too, and did not want to, the way she had begun to listen for his step, the way a room felt righter with him in it. She told herself it was only that a shared burden is lighter, that anyone would feel this working close beside another through a hard season. She had loved once and buried it, and she had promised the buried thing, in the awful clarity of the weeks after, that she would not do it again, would not lay herself open to that particular ruin a second time. She kept a careful distance side herself, even as the days pressed them physically closer, and she thought he kept one too out of his own losses, and that the 2 distances between them were a kind of understanding, and safe. It could not stay safe. Late in February, a storm came in that shut the world down to the length of a stretched rope, and she went out to the barn in the white roar of it to see to the stock, and could not find her way back, and stood a terrifying minute turned around in a whiteness, with no up or down in it, and it was his voice that found her, shouting her way home through the storm, and his good hand that closed on her wrist and did not let go until the kitchen door was shut behind them, and the lamp was steady and real between them on the table. They stood dripping and shaking, and she saw the fear in his face, fear for her, naked and unguarded. And she understood that the careful distance she had kept was a fiction she had been telling herself, and that he had stopped being able to tell it too. Neither of them said anything that night. That was not their way. But something had been let out into the room that could not be put back, and they both knew it, and in the days after the storm there was a new carefulness between them. A shyness almost, that was nothing like the wary distance of before. She caught him, looking at her across the yard and looking away. She found herself smiling at the stove for no reason and made herself stop. Cattle came through the winter. She had judged the hay right and the sell down right, and they lost only one old cow that would have died anyway. And when the calving started in the wet gray end of March, she was there for all of it, up to her elbows in the hard, beautiful business of it. And he beside her. There was one heifer bad off, a first calf turned wrong, and the two of them worked her half the night in the barn. And when at last the calf came and lay steaming in the straw, and then, unbelievably, lifted its head, she sat back on her heels in the filth and the blood and the lamp glow, and found she was crying, which she never did. And she looked up and found him watching her with his heart entirely in his face, no distance left in it anywhere. "Stay," he said. It was not a question, and it was not the arrangement they'd made on paper. Not for the cows, not for the place. Stay because. He stopped, and she watched him reach for words that cost him everything and find them anyway. Because I have not wanted a morning to come in 2 years until you started being in them. Stay for that. Or tell me to be quiet and I'll never say it again. She thought of the promise she'd made to a grave a long way east of here. She thought that the dead do not want us guarding our lives so carefully that we never live them, that the woman she had been would have been ashamed to see her turn from this out of fear. She thought all of it in the space of one breath, kneeling in the straw with a new calf breathing beside her, and a good man's whole hope held out in his open hand. "I'll stay," she said. They were married in April by a traveling minister, in the front room, with the daguerreotype turned back to face outward at last. He had done that himself, quietly, the morning of, and she had understood it as the gift it was, and had gone and stood before it a moment, the first wife looking out clear-eyed at the room, and had felt no jealousy, only a strange, grateful kinship. One woman who had loved this place, saluting another come to keep it. Mrs. Threshy came and cried, and the hay seller came and gripped the man's good shoulder, and this time the man laughed. The place did not become the jewel of anything overnight. Whatever the far-off buyers might have called it later, it became sound. It became a farm that met its note in June with money to spare, and then a farm that ran 100 head, and then 200. Over years, she does not tell quickly because the years themselves were not quick. They were made of 10,000 ordinary mornings, cows milked and fires lit and gates that did not shriek. A marriage built the only honest way she knew, which was not by promising, but by staying. By proving through the accumulation of days what could not be proven in a single one. She kept the books all those years, and they always balanced, and the crooked shoulder never did straighten, and neither of them ever much minded. The mountains kept their snow into July, and let it go, and took it back again. The country had tried to break the man and had not managed it, and it did not break her either. And in the end, that was the whole of the thing. Two people who had each been broken once, come to the same failing patch of ground, and refusing, day after ordinary day, to be broken again.